Hello, I am the Dark Knight Apologist, and welcome back to Dark Knight Apologetics. Hello, I am your host, Jeremy, and this is my new series, Debunking Bad Interpretations of the Bible. And in this video, I will be debunking the bad interpretation known as Geocentrism, and presenting an alternative interpretation that aligns with the heliocentric reality we live in, the one where the Earth is a globe and it orbits the Sun. I hope you will enjoy this presentation. And we're back. If you haven't watched my previous videos on debunking geocentrism, please go watch them now. Welcome back. Okay, we are starting with slide 22. To get some background information, I am talking about the verses on this slide. So let's continue. Okay, this is poetry for praising the Lord, and the word world is referring to the people, not the planet itself. It's referring to the people. Next slide. The word world is a noun, refers to the earth and all the countries or peoples or natural features, a part or aspect of human life, of the natural features of the earth in particular, from the Hebrew word tabel, meaning world. Next slide. The winds are your messengers, flames of fire are your servants. You placed the world on its foundations so it would never be moved. You clothed the earth with floods of water, the water that covered even the mountains. Psalm 104, verses 4 to 6. Next slide. This is from the creation psalm, which talks about the creation of how things were in the beginning. It's describing how things were in the beginning of creation. In verse 5, you have a reference to the foundations. That is referring to how things were arranged in the solar system so that the Earth cannot leave. It's poetic, and the foundations are gravity. We have this thing called gravity. Next slide. Give to the Lord the glory he deserves. Bring your offering and come into his presence. Worship the Lord in all his holy splendor. Let all the earth tremble before him. The world stands firm and cannot be shaken. Let the heavens be glad, let the earth rejoice. Tell all the nations, let the Lord reign. 1 Chronicles 16, verses 29 to 31. Next slide. This is poetic. The word world is referring to the people, not the planet itself. It's poetic. Next slide. Here we have a diagram of geocentrism versus heliocentrism. I think you can see the difference. Next slide. Okay. Now that we've done the simple stuff, let's get into the less common verses. Next slide. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Then God said, let the lights appear in the sky to separate the day from the night. Let them be signs to mark the seasons, the days, and the years. Let these lights in the sky shine down on the earth, and that is what happened. God made two great lights, the larger one to govern the day, and the smaller one to govern the night. He also made the stars. God set these lights in the sky to light the earth, to govern the day and night, and to separate the light from the darkness. And God saw that it was good. Genesis 1, verse 1, and verses 14 to 18. Next slide. We have heavens recorded first, so the heavens were created first. The heavens include the sun, the stars, so the sun was created before the earth. In verses 14 to 18, God created the sun and the moon and the stars before day 4 of creation, and they were shown for their purposes on day 4. The atmosphere was translucent prior to that, and God made it transparent. So these verses do make sense. God was basically just patting himself on the back in day 4. He just made the sky transparent when it was previously translucent. Next slide. Let's get into some stories that the geocentrists like to use to defend their side, and let's explain why they're wrong. Next slide. On the day the Lord gave the Israelites victory over the Amorites, Joshua prayed to the Lord in front of all the people of Israel. He said, "Let the sun stand still over Gibeon, and the moon over the valley of Ajalon." So the sun stood still, and the moon stayed in place until the nation of Israel had defeated its enemies. Is this not recorded in the book of Jashar? The sun stayed in the middle of the sky, and it did not set as on a normal day. Joshua 10, verses 12 to 13. Let's give you some context here. Basically, we have the Amorites fighting against the allied forces of the Gibeonites and the Israelites, commanded by Joshua. So, this prayer was given by Joshua, and there was a hailstorm going on. So, yeah, we had a hailstorm, and the prayer, and the hailstorm killed more people than the Israelite forces. So, yeah, there was that. Next slide. The hailstorm had lingering clouds, so it was an opaque sky of covered by storm clouds. The opaque sky hid the sun and moon, and the day basically just felt longer. So we have storm clouds and a hidden sun and moon by storm clouds. The day just felt longer. Next slide. Isaiah replied, "This is the sign from the Lord to prove that he will do as he promised. Would you like the shadow on the sundial to go forward 10 steps or backwards 10 steps?" "The shadow always moves forward," Hezekiah replied, "so that would be easy. Make it go 10 steps backward instead." So Isaiah the prophet asked the Lord to do this, and he caused the shadow to move 10 steps backward on the sundial of Ahaz. 2 Kings 20 verses 9 to 11, also repeated in Isaiah 38 verses 7 and 8. So yeah. Next slide. This is basically just a miracle. There is a scientific explanation which I will get into, so let's get into that scientific explanation. It is not necessary to suppose that God interfered so much with the natural course to halt and reverse the onward progression of the sun through the sky. Less spectacular and unlikely causes would have produced the effect. Under certain climate conditions, clouds of minute ice crystals can form at great height in the upper reaches of the air. The apparent result, as seen from the Earth, is the appearance of a band of light passing through the sun and two additional suns, one over either side of the true sun. This effect, which is known as parhelia or mock sun, is due to the refraction of the sun's light as it passes through the prismatic ice crystals on the way to the Earth. If now a cloud at a much lower altitude should obscure the real sun and the western mock sun over a certain district, the only light reaching that district is from the eastern mock sun, and the effect as if the sun had receded eastwards by a certain fixed amount of time, always equal to 1.5 hours. 2 occasions when this has happened are recorded. One on March 27th, 1703 at Metz in France, when the shadow on the sundial of the prior of Metz was displaced by 1.5 hours. The other occasion on March 28th of 1848 over the parts of Hampshire, when the same effect was observed. Now, this is a logical scientific explanation for it, and the miracle could very well have been due to this cause, except for one consideration. Hezekiah had been at great pains to put down Baal worship, the constant curse of Israel, and to restore the worship of Jehovah. The sun was a visible symbol of Baal. Such a phenomenon as is described previously would be probably interpreted by those who witnessed it as a manifestation of the power and interest of Baal. The credit of the sign, and consequently for the cure of Hezekiah's sickness, would have been given not to the God of Israel, but to Baal. Much of Hezekiah's own good work would have been undone. For this reason, it is unlikely that God would have used the sun as an instrument for effecting the sign. Next slide. Now that we got the stories out of the way, I think we're good. Next slide. Here's a diagram of our solar system. Next slide. We got the biblical cosmology and our Bible references. Time had a beginning. The universe had a beginning. The universe was created from the invisible. The dimensions of the universe were created. The universe is expanding. Creation and matter and energy has ended in the universe, refutes steady state theory. The universe is winding down and will wear out. The heavens rule over the earth, refutes geocentrism. Next slide. We got 3 heavens: Rakia, the atmosphere, the highest heavens where the sun, the moon, and the stars exist, and the 3rd heaven, God's abode outside the universe. Next slide. Biblical cosmology, this is our conclusion. The Bible is amazingly accurate. It does not teach geocentrism or flat earth theology. The rumored claim that the Bible teaches a flat circular disk covered by a solid domed heavens is a myth, and the rumored claim that the Bible teaches that the universe revolves around the earth at the center is also a myth. Next slide. I really don't get why people still believe this kind of stuff in the modern day. It really just does not make sense. People shouldn't be believing this kind of stuff in the modern day. Stop using your brain as a paperweight and start using it to think with. That's kind of how things should work in the modern day. Next slide. I got my sources from God and Science, and that's the end of this video. Go visit that website if you want to. I think we're done here. Okay? And we're done, but be sure to stick around for bonus materials and footnotes. Signing out from Midwest America, this is the Dark Knight Apologist.